Starting with the question at number 10, who was Buddha anyways? Well, in Sanskrit, Buddha means the awakened one. Now, Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was born in 567 BCE in a wealthy ruling family. One day, while he was out of his palace, he saw three things that really detached him from his privileged life: old men, the sick people, as well as dead people. And that day, he discovered the real sufferings of life. So he wanted to learn more, and he gave up all of his riches and he adopted the lifestyle of a holy man, and he learned meditation from different teachers. Now, he took a minimal diet and meditated under a Bodhi tree. Now, after meditating for 40 consecutive days, he achieved a state of nirvana and ultimately became the Buddha. Now, the rest of his life, he continued teaching people Dharma, which is the essential truths about the nature of existence, the cause of suffering, and how to overcome desire. From there, we move on to the question at number 9. What does Buddhism actually teach anyways? Okay, so in Buddha's first sermon, he said this, and I quote, "I teach just one thing, and only one thing: suffering and the end of suffering." Now, the collection of teachings of Buddhism is known as Dharma, and it covers pretty much every aspect of human existence, from moral and ethical behavior to mental discipline to compassionate service to one another. And now, the ultimate goal of the Dharma is to really help people awaken to the true nature of reality, and also to change their behavior as well as their thought patterns so that they can be completely free from all types of suffering. Buddha explained 4 noble truths, and those are: all existence is dukkha, and dukkha is the inescapable truth of life. Also, the cause of dukkha is craving. The cessation of dukkha comes with the cessation of craving. And finally, there is a path that leads from dukkha. So with all this said so far, it leads us to our next question. Is Buddhism a religion? Well, if one studies Buddhism, it's more like a philosophy than a religion. There are no weekly or daily worships that you need to attend, and no belief in God like other religions. Now, it's a spiritually focused self-help philosophy, although it is often described as a religion due to the various forms of Buddhism that have sprung up in our world today. It gives you the meaning of life, ethics, psychology, human behavior, the nature of consciousness. There's some politics in there as well, and also secular disciplines. But in practice, Buddhism can look like any other religion, like, going through the practice of attaining nirvana, like we just mentioned earlier. Now, another very religious aspect of Buddhism is that it shares supernatural beliefs with other religions. Now, the tales in the religious texts are also attached to the Buddha, and also the belief of the afterlife in Buddhism makes it seem like a religion. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about supernatural beings later on, so stick around with me. For now, we're going to move on to question number 7. Are all Buddhists vegetarian? Because the Buddha taught against harming any sentient creature, some people believe that all Buddhists are pacifists and vegetarian who would never hurt a fly, let alone a cow, or even an enemy soldier if they were in war. Now, that, however, is just not the case. Even the Buddha rejected the notion of all Buddhists being vegetarian, although it kind of goes against the Buddhist core notion of no harm, or ahimsa, which again we'll be talking about a little bit later. But next up, we have question number 6. What is karma anyways? Karma in Buddhism is different from karma in Western society. In Buddhism, karma is the universal rule of morally ambiguous cause and effect. Now, it means that your every action, whether it's good or bad, will have certain consequences. That's it. The Buddha defined karma as not only action, but also the intention behind the action. Compassion, generosity, sympathy, kindness, and wisdom motivate good or skillful actions, according to Buddha, whereas hatred, greed, and delusion motivate bad or unskillful actions. So we reach halfway in this episode, guys, and that leads us to question number 5. Who can be a monk? Well, anyone can take the vows of a Buddhist monk or nun and enter the walls of monastic monastic life with proper preparation and sense of commitment. Some monasteries, they offer part-time ordination because, becoming a Buddhist monk or nun is a lifelong commitment. So it's a big commitment for a lot of people. So you can do it part-time in certain instances. Many Buddhist monks and nuns have celibate lives as well. And outside of the monastery, they do not work, earn money. They spend their whole day, just meditating and studying. While on the plus side, you don't really have to worry about the stresses of what to wear or how to style your hair or anything like that. Every day, monks and nuns, they completely shave their heads and wear very simple robes. So yeah, there's no fashion competition going on between them. It's a serious decision in one's life, so before preparation, someone needs to really be certain that they are aware of all the realities of what it means to be a Buddhist monk. Moving on to question number 4, who is the Dalai Lama? He is the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, it is believed that Dalai Lama is an enlightened being and has reincarnated more than a dozen times. In this way, he has been teaching Dharma for more than 100 years, and Dalai Lama has written best-selling books for his lay audience that translate Buddhist teachings of compassion and happiness. He also travels the world to speak to people of all religions and backgrounds about the benefits of cultivating a spirit of tolerance, forgiveness, and self-discipline. He is also a political leader of Tibet, but he retired from politics back in the year 2011. Now, the question at number 3 is, why meditate? Meditation is a very common practice in Buddhism, and Buddha taught that meditation is one of the best tools for transforming the mind. The ultimate goal of Buddhism is to change your mind and make it healthy and free of all negative thoughts. So meditation is just a tool to achieve this. Meditation was not always a daily exercise, but now since the start of the 20th century, it's really become a practice that's done daily. Now, meditation aims to get calmness and peace of mind, and Buddhists believe that meditating helps you spend your daily life in a much better way. Meditation is approached differently by the different Buddhist schools. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, practitioners, they attempt to mentally recreate an image of the Buddha or silently repeat a mantra. Now, focusing on the breath and learning to observe passing thoughts and feelings with detachment are two common meditative practices in Theravada Buddhism. Moving on to question number 2, what is nirvana? We mentioned it, but I'm going to go into more detail here. It is the most confusing concept in Buddhism, well, for me at least, but I'll try to make it easy for myself and also for you. Nirvana translates to extinguishing, quenching, blowing out, and it comes from the Sanskrit language. But what is extinguishing here? Is it the soul? Well, it couldn't be that because Buddhists, they do not believe in the concept of the soul. The thing that is extinguished, however, is dukkha, the root cause of suffering, greed, hatred, and delusion. If a person can overcome their irrational desires, they will enter a state of unparalleled compassion, peace, and joy known as nirvana. And we end off at question number 1. Do Buddhists believe in a god? Well, there is no concept of one god in Buddhism, but over time we have seen that Buddhists have developed a collection of divine beings called devas who fill their religious texts. Now, today Buddhists throughout Asia, they pray to various gods for protection or for good crops or for health, as well as they pray for other different benefits. So, was Buddha himself a god? Well, he says no, but some ancient Buddhist texts teach that Buddha was a god before he was reborn as Siddhartha Gautama. Number 10, we have the lie of all Buddhists meditate. Meditation is often identified as a central practice of Buddhism. However, the majority of Buddhists throughout history, they don't meditate. Meditation has traditionally been considered a practice of monks, and even then, only certain monks. It's only up until about the 20th century that the practice of meditation had begun to be widely practiced by the common person. The lie number 9 is all Buddhists are vegetarians. Bhiksu, which is a Sanskrit term that translates as monk, literally means beggar. So Buddhist monks and nuns originally begged for their daily meal, and some still do this, and they ate whatever was given to them, and sometimes meat was given, so they ate that. Also, according to some sources, the Buddha suffered before he entered nirvana and attained enlightenment after he ate pork. After the Buddha's death though, vegetarianism began to be promoted in some Buddhist texts. But even today, not all Buddhists are vegetarians. Moving on to the light number 8. No worship of gods in Buddhism. In certain types of Buddhism, like Japanese Buddhism, there is a wide variety of cosmic beings known as devas and spiritual beings known as bodhisattvas and Buddhas. And these beings dwell in various areas of the universe. Some even respond to people's prayers. Next up, let's look at Buddhism teaches that nothing exists. Buddhism doesn't actually teach this though. It does challenge the understanding of how things exist, and it teaches that beings and occurrences have no inherent existence. But Buddhism does not teach that there is no existence at all. The nothing exists misconception actually comes from a misunderstanding of the teaching of anatta and shunyata in Buddhism, but these are not beliefs of nothing exists. Rather, they teach that we understand existence in a limited way and a very biased way. Now, the light number 6 is Buddhists believe in reincarnation. This one, yeah, it blew my mind. Now, if by reincarnation you mean the transferring of a soul into a new body after the former body dies, then yeah, no. The Buddha did not teach reincarnation. He taught that there was no soul even to transfer to another body. However, there is a Buddhist teaching of rebirth, not the same as reincarnation. The teaching says that it is the energy or conditioning created by one life that is reborn into another life, not the soul being reborn. According to Theravada Buddhism scholar Walpola Rahula, a person who dies here and is reborn elsewhere is neither the same person nor another. However, you don't have to believe in rebirth to be a Buddhist. It's not essential. Halfway in, the light number 5 is karma is fate. If you didn't already know, the word karma refers to action, not fate. In Buddhism, karma is an energy created by willful action through thoughts, words, and deeds. Everyone is always creating karma with every second that passes, and the karma we create affects us at every moment of the day. So simply put, according to Buddhism, karma is an action, not a result, and the future is not set in stone. So just because you did something a particular way doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a specified outcome. The lie that I'm going to look at number 4 is karma punishes people. So pretty similar to the lie at number 5, but karma is not a cosmic system of justice and punishment. There is no unseen force that's manipulating karma to punish evil people. Buddhism teaches that karma is just as impersonal as gravity is. But karma is not the only force that makes things happen in the world. And if a flood destroys a city, it is not accurate to assume that karma made that flood happen because the people in the city did evil things. So karma is a force that can result in happy life circumstances or a miserable life circumstance, regardless of who the person is. Now let's talk about the light number 3. Enlightenment is just eternal bliss. All of a sudden. People often think that becoming enlightened is like turning on a light bulb and then a person goes from being ignorant and frustrated to being blissful through one big aha moment. No, doesn't work that way. The Sanskrit term that's often translated as enlightenment actually means awakening. So most people awaken gradually over a period of time, or they're awakened through a series of opening experiences. Even the most enlightened people are not just floating around on a cloud of bliss all the time. They still live in the world. They still get sick. They still face danger, and they still stub their toes sometimes. So it's not all perfect. All right, for the lie at number 2, Buddhists worship the Buddha. The historical Buddha is considered to be a human being who attained enlightenment through his own efforts. Now, the Buddha did not specifically teach that there was no God. He just taught that believing in a god or gods was not useful to realizing enlightenment. Buddha also represents enlightenment itself, self, which is also the natural state of all beings according to Buddhism. And the images that we see of Buddha are objects of devotion and reverence, but are not worshipped as gods. And we finally made it to the last lie in this episode. At number 1, Buddhists can't have relationships. Now, when people hear that Buddhists practice something called non-attachment, they sometimes think that Buddhists can't have relationships with other people. But you see, at the root of attachment is believing that there is a self to attach and an other self to attach to. But Buddhism teaches that the self is an illusion and that ultimately nothing is separate. When one realizes this, there is no need for attachment. But that doesn't mean that Buddhists can't be in close and loving relationships with other people. This one starting at number 10. Let's look at the legends of Buddha. The many legends of the Buddha identify him as a prince or someone from a family with high status. But generally speaking, he is identified as the son of King Suddhodana Gautama. But despite this belief, there is not really any 100% reliable historical evidence for believing that the Buddha was a prince. Now, the other belief is that the Buddha's father was a regional leader similar to the chief of a tribe, and the society that the Buddha lived in was more like a republic as opposed to a monarchy under the rulership of a king or queen. Either way though, he left his life all behind, everything behind, to follow the path of truth when he saw the poverty and sickness of the people around him. This led the Buddha to drop his birth name Siddhartha Gautama. Now for fact number 9, let's look at the name Buddha. Now, many people think that the Buddha is a person, but in actuality, that's a misconception. Anyone can be a Buddha, and the term is simply used for a person who has reached a state of nirvana, which is a state of enlightenment. Now, Siddhartha Gautama is believed to be the first Buddha, and after that, there have been several other Buddhas. Some say there were other Buddhas before him, but this is the first time that this term has been used for somebody. Now, this is one of the reasons, by the way, why you'll see various different faces on statues depicting Buddha. But speaking of the way of enlightenment, let's actually look at that next. At the time of Buddha's quest for enlightenment, there were many religious practices that promoted either the overindulgence of the senses or deprivation through acts like fasting for weeks at a time. Then, after realizing that neither one of these paths were really beneficial, he created what would be later known as the middle way to enlightenment. Now, this was a balanced approach that really emphasized inward work rather than outward rejection of things. Next up, I want to look at where enlightenment was attained. To achieve enlightenment, young Siddhartha Gautama, he vowed to sit under a Bodhi tree and meditate until he transcended all suffering. Now, the end of an extremely long meditation session and mental battles that he was facing, he became awakened and was then known as the Buddha. Now, the Bodhi tree, which is also called the tree of awakening, is also known as the Bodhi fig tree or the Bo tree. So you may hear those terms depending on what source you look at in reference to this particular tree. But this specific tree was located in Bodh Gaya, Bihar in India. For fact number 6, Buddha was not a man of God. A large number of religious figures have claimed to be either gods, manifestation of gods, or prophets of gods. But Buddha, however, never actually claimed to be a god. He never claimed to be a prophet or a manifestation of the gods either. He simply claimed to be a man who discovered the ultimate state of being human. He claimed that knowledge and personal effort, not devotion to the gods, is the actual way to achieve salvation. From there, let's look at fact number 5. Buddha was not a vegetarian. There's a popular perception of the Buddha being a very strict vegetarian, but it is said that not even the early Buddhist sources mention the Buddha being anything near vegetarian. As a matter of fact, many accounts actually describe the Buddha eating meat and also recommending meat broths to treat certain illnesses. And there's also some accounts that say that the Buddha's last meal was actually a wild boar. Vegetarianism, however, became linked to Buddhism years after the Buddha had passed away. Buddha also had one final request before he passed away. He taught and he traveled his entire life until the age of 80 years old, and that's the time when he passed away. But before that, his final request of his followers was this: all component things in the world are changeable. They are not lasting. Work hard to gain your own salvation. For fact number 3, did you know that there's also other Buddhas? And Buddhists now believe that there were other individuals who became Buddhas before Buddha. In Theravada Buddhism, it teaches that there are 28 Buddhas, having Gautama Buddha as the last one, while Mahayana Buddhism also recognizes various other Buddhas of celestial origin. On top of that, perhaps the most popular Buddha depiction is Budai, who was a Chinese monk, and he's often identified and being venerated as Maitreya Buddha in Chan Buddhism. And his nickname in Chinese is the Laughing Buddha, and he's also known in different parts around the world as the Fat Buddha. But he actually is not Buddha. Many people believe that though, and his name, Budai, by the way, means cloth sack in Chinese. So I just want to throw that in there and clear up that particular misconception around Budai. Now let's look at the date of birth next. Well, we can't actually look at the date of birth because nobody actually knows the date of birth of Siddhartha Gautama. It was said that he was either born in 536 BC or in 480 BC, and the details of his personal life were only passed down orally from generation to generation, and that's why there's no completely reliable source regarding the date of his birth. Either way, people agree on the fact that he was born in what is known as Nepal. And for fact number 1, let's end off with Buddha's son. He only had one son, and his name was Rahula. His son would later on become a monk, and some say that the Buddha was not necessarily the most ideal father, considering that he had left everything behind. But either way, since his status in society was very high, of course the Buddha's son would be well looked after. It is also said that Rahula died before the Buddha actually did, and according to Pali and Chinese sources, this happened as he was traveling, like physically traveling through the second Buddhist heaven.